The Executive and the Mystic podcast, co-hosted by Fred LeFranc and Kristina Wiltsee, where wisdom meets business.
Good day, Kristina. So
Hello.
Here we are again.
Yes. Hello, Fred. We are here again. So much has happened since the last time we were here.
Wow. You're not kidding. Just to review for everybody, we're talking about the ABCs of leadership. And our last episode was about alignment. And today's episode is about balance. And it's so appropriate. Kristina and I had an opportunity to spend a week together at a retreat where we learned a lot of new information, a lot of new things in the attempt to sort of better ourselves. I think that's one of the qualities that I admire a lot about Kristina. She's always learning, intellectually curious. And we both got sick, which apparently is an example that our body's resisting change. And so it's a perfect topic to talk about balance. And balance is the thing that happens, or actually what imbalance is what happens in life when you got everything all figured out, and all of a sudden life says, "Oh, really? Here, hang on to this for a while." And you're like, "Whoa, what just happened to me?" And that's a real world situation that everyone finds ourselves in. Life creates a paradox. You're torn between two forces. You're torn between providing a financial result against the quality of service or quality of a product, and which one do you want? And the one thing that I do know is that balance is not static. It's not a dead weight that you're trying to hang on to. It's very, very dynamic. And our challenge as humans is to understand, where is that equilibrium? Where is our center? How do we find balance intellectually, psychologically, emotionally, physically, and go from there? And so Kristina has decided to be a guinea pig today and sort of share one of her challenges in finding balance, because that is exactly what we go through. So we got to practice what I preach. So Kristina, I'll turn it over to you.
Yeah, absolutely. I just want to give everybody, before we jump into our case study, this when we talk about the ABCs, we talk about alignment, balance, and coherence. The retreat that Fred and I just went on had a lot about coherence. It had a lot about that. We'll talk about that in the next episode. But as a reminder, this understanding of alignment is how can we align with the highest principles possible, the highest principles that we have access to, right? Whether those are laws of physics, whether those are laws of the universe that we've come to understand, or whether they are basically whatever we feel as if we can achieve and feels like we can actually say, yes, this is the basis. So we use the example of the universe is neutral. We've used the example of as above, so below, which is the law of correspondence, which is more of a spiritual law, less necessarily of a scientific law, but one that we see mathematically in fractal patterns and holograms and things along those lines, where it's like whatever you see at a small level is going to actually be reflected in many, many different levels. They used an example in the retreat that we were at of how 3 stones can fall in water, and the wave pattern that each of those stones presents can be taken. You can take a little tiny cross section of that thing. You can put lasers, very coherent laser light through it, and you can actually map exactly what those 3 stones look like just by understanding the wave pattern that comes off of it. It's this understanding of the hologram, and that we're aligning as much as possible with those principles. The thing with alignment is that it's relatively static. It's like one of those things that when you align yourself with this principle, you could align yourself with that principle for the rest of your life, right? The universe is neutral. Perfect example. I can do that. I don't need to change that. Balance requires so much dynamism, so much dynamics, so much strength. It's effectively, if the alignment is the skeletal structure, the balance is the muscles and how you develop them to be able to withhold and withstand yourself in alignment. Like, how are you actually maintaining your and your integrity when you're being challenged continually? It's like, I'm trying to walk across the tightrope. I have this really great principle and I know that I can make it to the other side. But what is the actual experience of, like, what have I done to prepare myself to be able to handle all of the different winds that are going to come up and everything along those lines? And to Fred's point, the paradox of how we hold those two. So yes, I will be the guinea pig of what this feels like. All right, Fred, here's the situation.
Okay. I'm ready.
Did you
ready.
want to add anything to the alignment or balance before we jump in?
No. I thought yeah, you said it very well. It's perfect.
Yeah. Okay. So here's the thing. I always like to align myself with a lot of different things. And, one of the ways that I like to work with people in particular is I call it the inner villain system, but it's kind of like this inner antagonist that we have sometimes that are kind of working against us. And oftentimes when we're not aligned with those highest principles, we're aligned with a strategy that has worked for a really, really long time. And we're like, this is a principle of my life. Right. But it's actually just a strategy that you developed when you were in a more difficult time and you thought it was a good idea. Right. Examples can be, I'm always going to be alone because I don't trust being with other people. That seems like a pretty solid principle when you're looking at it. And then you start to realize maybe it's not. Even something that feels totally good. Fred and I have talked about this of wanting to always be the connector. And in the total web of connection, like you're kind of people are reliant on you all the time, right? Fred, you can reflect that strategy a little bit. It's got its wonderful things, but it's also really important to balance it with receiving help, right? With receiving support from other people and recognizing that if you are always there for everybody doing everything, someday there might be a situation in which your life says, guess what? It's time for you to receive help. And how does that feel? Yeah?
Right. Sure. And especially as a leader, leaders are used to sort of commanding, giving directives and having all the answers. And when a leader is faced with a conundrum where he or she has to say, I don't know, and I need help, that's difficult. That's a little bit small ego death there.
Oh yeah. So I say this because I've had a strategy for quite some time of being content with having very little and being able to kind of be okay with that. So background on me, I've done just about every job that you can imagine, right? I was always trying to find that exciting thing, trying to find that different thing, whether I was working as a chemist overseas, in New Zealand, doing whatever felt good at whatever time. But in any given one of those instances, I was able to basically subsist on almost nothing. Right. And I knew that I had the ability to do that. And for me, that was a principle, that was a strategy in my life that I was like, okay, as long as I have my freedom, I'm okay with I'm okay with not having a lot because then I have my freedom. Right. And so that's the fundamental strategy and principle that I was basing my life off of. And now I find myself in this moment where I actually want abundance, right? I actually want there to be a lot, and yet I want to still be able to maintain that freedom of choice. And so knowing that I'm going through this, ever since we came back from this retreat, I've been in this turmoil of this resistance to change, of what does it actually look like? Am I actually giving up freedom if I choose to travel more and I live in a relatively isolated environment. I live in 60 acres out in the middle of nowhere, 2 hours from major airport. I mean, granted, the busiest airport in the world, but still. And so I want to present this to you, Fred, as how would you approach this from a balance perspective to help me understand the fact that I'm really struggling with maintaining freedom, right, of the choices, and also stepping into the abundance of my career and everything that is involved with really moving forward with that.
Okay.
Quite the presentation there.
Yeah, that's all right. It's a small topic. All right. Well, I mean, I guess let's first, I would start off with sort of some beliefs first, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, and maybe this is the alignment part, right? And one of them is this sense of personal freedom that you've always maintained, this free spirit, globe-hopping, doing whatever you want to do, and so forth and so on. And that, I think, we want to preserve that. I think that makes sense, right? Freedom. I always find it interesting is that I find that people who are disorganized think that they're free, when the reality is people who are organized are free because they have things in an order, and if they choose to be spontaneous and go do something else, they know what to come back to. But now let's talk about abundance, right? So, because I went through a similar challenge earlier in my life in terms of what are your beliefs around abundance? And abundance does not mean money solely. It's more than money. It's a lot more than money. It is the fact that you allow things into your life, which you also are capable of giving to others. It's a two-way street. And I remember reading a long time ago that money's nothing but energy. And I was working hard for $1, and I was like, energy? That's $1. I don't know about energy. But then I realized, hey, it's my life energy I'm putting into something. It's the value I'm creating or what I'm going to receive in return. And so I think you could start by asking yourself, what is your definition of abundance? And is that definition of abundance something that has some negative overtones to it? You know, where somehow your possessions own you kind of thinking, right? Versus your possessions allow you to do other things. And maybe actually the abundance enables more of the freedom you want. Where right now you are the person thinking that may not have that freedom because they feel restriction. They're unable to do certain things because I have to maintain whatever lifestyle I have to keep a roof over my head, and therefore I can't really stretch myself beyond that. So let me ask you that first question. What's your definition of abundance?
So I would say that my definition of abundance is in many ways a risk-free kind of like, honestly, traditionally it's been almost entirely associated with freedom. And I know that sounds like a strange thing to say, because effectively freedom is simply the lack of, I would define freedom as the lack of structure, that, the lack of kind of restriction from the movement of abundance, but it is not essentially abundance in and of itself. So for me, abundance has never meant something material. Right. And this is something that I think is a very common thing with people who are of a spiritual nature, especially if they're healers, things along those lines. We kind of call it, we have a number of different words for it, but it's this interesting thing where, yes, it's money, but it's more so the ability to evoke love, and kind of it's more of an ephemeral thing, if that makes sense. It's less structural in nature. So I would say I see abundance now, having worked with people in many ways with abundance, as the movement of energy in any way, shape, or form that it comes into. And it's our decision as to where we channel that energy. For some people, money becomes the most important thing to channel that to. For some people, it's influence. For some people, it's clout or reputation. For some, there's a lot of different forms of abundance as they come in that we can actually perceive it in.
This episode is brought to you by Results Through Strategy. Since 2006, RTS has been the go-to partner for restaurants and food service brands, navigating growth, transformation, or recovery. Their team of seasoned industry veterans helps companies rediscover their purpose, realign with their values, and implement strategies that build measurable, sustainable performance.
No, that's interesting. Okay, so you said a couple of things. One of them was you said that freedom is the lack of structure. And I said earlier, the people who are really
organized,
free,
exactly,
are the ones that have some sort of structure. And if you look at just this planet, it's got a tremendous amount of structure built into it. Yet birds can fly where they choose to fly, and bugs show up where they want to show up, and so forth and so on. But if we get down to the concept in business, if you have a business that is trying to grow and provide value to its customers, to its employees, the stakeholder mentality, to its vendors, to its community, then by definition, that type of abundance means that you're creating value in some shape or form. It's either a product or a service that people need and require, and you can charge enough to have profit left over, and that profit being left over allows you to invest and to do other things with it. And it's sort of a reframing of what it means. I mean, it's not the classic Gordon Gekko, greed is good. No, it's not good. Greed is not good because it's all about me. This is when you start looking at abundance on a very broad level. And freedom is the expression of that. And abundance, greater abundance, does allow you to be freer, not just for yourself, but for the people you love. And that includes your stakeholders as well from that standpoint. It's an interesting conundrum, right? Because if you want to live the life in aesthetic, that's great. But what's your contribution going to be to others? Usually an aesthetic is very much an individual thing. You're a monk, you're in the cave somewhere. We're not talking about that. You live in the real world. And the incredible opportunity that we have even in this forum is to share ideas with people, where when we give our ideas away, we don't lose them. They get multiplied.
Yes.
And they continue to spread.
Yes.
And if we're able to, by sharing, as you are today, your personal experience, I think you're able to help people realize that, yeah, I've got these struggles as well. And how do I reconcile something that still I sense a negative overtone, that somehow this abundance may take something away when in reality it doesn't. And I'll give you, this is not a great example, but I'll do it the best I can on camera. So I always, when I find people who have that mindset, not your mindset, but the mindset that somehow there's a limit, there's a capacity. And I always say, here, put your arms, in front of yourself like this. Okay, hang on to whatever you've got. You're hanging on because you don't want anyone to come and grab what you own and what you have. You're very possessive and you covet these things. And I said, and as much as you are, yes, you are keeping things in, you're also keeping things out. All right. And it's okay to have walls, but just get a door and a window every now and then, right? Let some light in. The other thing is that if you then open up your arms like this and thrust your chest out with your heart leaning forward, you actually feel this unbelievable opening. And as you open your arms to receive, you're also opening up your arms to give.
Yep.
And that's when I first learned that that's the energy flow that comes in between there. It's almost, it plays a little bit into that concept of pay it forward. If you are giving to others, you will receive tenfold in return. It may not be from the person you're giving, and you have to give without a condition. You have to really give. If you give something to someone, they don't say thank you, don't worry about it. The universe is keeping score. We don't have to keep score. If you're keeping score, you're not doing it for the right reasons. And I think that I know that for me and for my family, because that's really what we're all working for, is our families, is that abundance allows me to give them more than just survival, Maslow's, higher order of needs. It allows me to give them experiences and things they would not ordinarily have. And in turn, that I think that mindset and that emotional attitude gives them an example of how they could be in their lives. And then they can go out there and receive and achieve success. I'm not saying that $1 billion makes you a mean, evil person, because I've met plenty of billionaires and some of them are assholes. I've also met billionaires who are not assholes, who are generous, loving, kind human beings. They just have a different relationship with how they use their money and how they see that. It does not mean they attract any less. You can attract a lot of money, be a miser, and be miserable and by yourself, and have a bunch of fawning idiots around you that are just yes people. Or you could actually be a human being that people are attracted to because you've embraced. And I think this would be a very much a universal law of abundance, and the fact that the universe does provide for us. It really does that. If you really believe that, it's a positive intent versus a negative intent. And I think the transition that says, you've got 60 acres. Okay. And that's a lot for most people. They don't have 60 acres, but and it's not like all built out. You don't have a resort and all that kind of stuff. It's a lot of, wonderful woodland and so forth and so on. But there's an opportunity on those 60 acres for you to create a sanctuary for others in time. And that's going to take capital. And it's going to take capital. And the capital will come because as you continue to give greater value to people in their lives, for them to find their own purpose and their own way through what they're trying to deal with. And then, in fact, you're going to charge for it. You have to charge for it. It continues to get back to you. You'll find that pretty much you're on that, you're plugged in. You're on that 240 volt line instead of this. You're not on a battery any longer that dies out every now and then. You got to go recharge. You're really caught up in the aspect of life. And I think it allows you maybe to reframe what abundance really means to you tangibly. Because it does come from an idea. Abundance is an idea, and that there's a tangible expression of it. It doesn't mean you have to wear designer clothes or drive a Lamborghini. If that's what it means to you, go ahead. But it doesn't. But it can mean that you're going to have utility, and you're going to have what you need in order to live your life fully as an expression of yourself without violating some dogma or some rules that you have in your head about what this really means. And you and I were blessed with the opportunity to go to this retreat. It wasn't free, but it was an investment in ourselves, and there's going to be a return on it. And as we're both struggling sort of with the change we're going through, which is why we're both somewhat ill, because there was an imbalance in our bodies that we had to figure out here.
Yeah.
I think at the end of it, I have a very positive outlook that it's all going to balance itself in a very unique way, there's a metamorphosis. I was talking to someone the other day, the Chinese year of the snake. And the snake is a very powerful symbol in the Chinese culture because this animal that sheds its skin, its old beliefs, its old habits, its preconceived notions of oneself, and out of it emerges something new, something better. But the key thing about it is that it's an inside-out job. So nothing's happening to you, it's happening for you. That would be the way I would phrase it.
No, that's wonderful, Fred. I appreciate that. And it really brings us back to the essence of balance, because as I was listening to you, I was hearing kind of in the way that I operate, right? What is it that you've put balance in opposition to? And that's the paradox, right? Abundance and risk, as an example, or abundance and freedom, right? It's like so often with balance, we put things in opposition to one another, right? We put things to opposition into one another, and we basically set the battle, right? It's almost as if we're like, we're the ones who are basically putting the two things into the ring and saying, well, you guys have to fight it out. And then we start to recognize that we don't need to put those two things necessarily in the ring, or we need to embrace that there doesn't need to be something that ultimately wins, right? So if for me, I'm saying abundance is in opposition to abundance is risky and I don't want to risk, right? Which would be a resistance to change, right? And a resistance to the possibility of failure. Abundance and freedom. Like if I get a bunch of abundance, suddenly all of a sudden I'm not going to be able to make my own choices, right? Or I'm going to, somebody's going to say whatever, right? Or abundance and anything else, right? So any other thing. Oh, and corruption. That's a good one for me, right? Oh, if I become abundant, then I'm going to become corrupt. And, because I've been accused of that in the past, honestly. Like I've had relationships with healers who were purely donation based. And this is kind of this very prevalent thing in this whole community of people who are, working in this space, is that there's some people who've really understood the abundance principle and really go with it, and they have abundant lives. And then there are others who are in enforced poverty, right? And enforced scarcity because they come from lineages or they come from whatever that says that they're not supposed to make money, it's immoral to make money helping people in this way, right? And that you need to, right? So you can see that there's this thing in which I'm pitting abundance against all these other things in the ring. And the paradox says you can have both. And you can deal with both, and you can handle both, right? Yeah.
Yeah, well, many people rationalize scarcity as if it was a choice.
Mm-hmm.
That's fine. That's how they choose to do that, by rationalizing it. That's by all means. I mean, I was not born wealthy. I don't pretend to be wealthy. I mean, I'm very comfortable. I remember there was a time in my life when I was down to like nothing, zero. And I did a lot of reading and researching on it. And there was an attitude that said, are you living your life from you don't have enough? And the answer was yes. And then there's another, on that spectrum, there is enough. You have enough. Okay. Now, enough may change the definition, but there was the concept of enough. And then there's another one that says you have more than enough. And if you live from more than enough, you are in the place of abundance. Now, it's not the $20. And so the basic idea was that I would take that $20, break it up into small bills, and give some of it away as an example to myself that I have more than enough. So I did that. Okay. That was very painful for me because I needed the money. But I said, nope, I'm coming from a position of abundance. I have more than enough. And therefore I can take some of this money and donate it or give it to someone who really has lack in their life and needs an example in their life that they will be provided for. And that's what I did. And so there was a homeless person that I gave $5 to. So it's 25% of my holdings at that time. Now, I don't know whether it worked instantly. I can't say that for a fact, but I'll say to you that after I made that shift and started looking from the standpoint of more than enough, my life changed. It also said, if you're walking across the street, you see a pen in the floor, pick it up. Don't just leave it lay there. It's there for a reason. Pick it up. It's, in other words, always be on the lookout for signs of we get a lot of signs in life that things will show up, and things showed up for me in very powerful ways. I got a new job. It paid me a lot more money. I was able to get a new car. I mean, things began to happen materially, but to me, they were just examples that I was in the right frame of mind. They were not the end all, like, oh, look at me, I have a new car. That wasn't what it was about. It's just transportation. I'm not a gearhead, but it moved forward, because I spent a period of my life where I had very little money, I had no money. I don't think I bought a new shirt for 5 years. I still have shirts that I've had for 30, but I've taken care of them, and it's really beginning to sort of, very painfully, step by step by step, I do that. And by the way, this mindset works when you put it into business, because once you've got it figured out, you can walk into business and look around your business operation, look at the people with you. I've had employees who rack up these horrible credit card bills because they don't understand how to use credit. They don't understand the concept of interest. They don't understand compound interest. If you have savings, where it doubles it in 7 years, real fundamental things about how to live in this life. And I know when we've had employees come up to us and ask us for loans, we've always said, we'll be willing to help you, but you need to share everything with us. So we want to show you how to manage your money, to find out what's going on. And then you find out that they have a car they really can't afford, or they're wasting money on things that make no sense. You have to live within your means. I mean, I just heard something that said that everyone on this planet could be happy if they learn to live within their means tomorrow.
Yep.
If you live within your means, then you're fine. And ironically, again, that's a mindset that allows you to start growing beyond that, to say, I have a vision for something greater for myself. I have a vision greater for my business. And if you're running a business, that business is going to provide for you.
Uh-huh.
I always told my employees, let me reward you, but you have to give me the ammunition to reward you. You have to provide that for me in order to give it back to you. It starts with you. It doesn't start with me. It starts with you. And there's nothing, there's no better feeling for someone to feel that they've earned something, where they really got it because of their sincere efforts. Now, you have to have a transparent relationship with employees to do that. It just can't be a game. I've worked for plenty of people who was all about them.
Mm-hmm.
They wanted their success. They wanted their abundance at the expense of everybody else's. That's a losing game.
Yeah.
Eventually, it catches up with you. So true abundance is really saying ultimately that it does start with me as an individual, it extends to my family, goes on to the broader world of community, and so forth and so on. And it's not easy. I think you're going to find yourself in resistance to that for a while.
Mm-hmm.
There will be a natural sense. And that's where you got to go back and say, what am I really placing value on here? Why is this bad? Because abundance isn't bad. But because abundance and wealth is an example of abundance, but it's not the sole definition of abundance.
Exactly.
And also, your family, the people who love you, your broader community, that's a lot of wealth if you have that. And pretty soon you start realizing that no. Abundance has so many immaterial aspects to it as well as material aspects to it. And why not have it all?
Exactly. And that's kind of how I see things. And in general, I see that I have an absolute abundance of wonderful, beautiful, supportive people in my life, of love, of friends, family, client, everything that goes along those lines. I have so much abundance that in many ways the paradox is, well, is it okay for me to ask for a different type of abundance? Am I devaluing this other type of abundance that I have if I try and if I try and say, well, actually, it would be okay to have monetary abundance too, right? Or it would be okay to have enough in that way, because the cultivation of those other things were actually the other form of wealth, which is relationships, has been so much more important to me and so much more of an emphasis in my life, that, again, putting those things in the battle ring together. Okay, so it's like either I have really great relationships or I have money, right?
Yeah, they're not mutually exclusive.
They're not mutually exclusive.
Yeah, but I did really. The classic story is you get that poor person that wins the lotto, and 5 years later they're bankrupt.
Yeah,
because they have a bad relationship with money. They don't understand relationship with money, and of course, everyone comes out of the woodwork looking for money because they think that that's you owe me, right? It's very dysfunctional. It's very sad that goes on. But it's interesting to see when you meet people who are really successful in life, and that means that they have a balance in their life. They have built some wealth. They've built comfort. They're generous with their time. They're generous with their money. One of the things that they all share is they stop chasing it. They get into a place where they begin to just receive it, and it comes to them. Not like you sit there and say $1 million shows up on my doorstep. That's not what I'm saying. But the opportunities come to you. Abundance and wealth generation come to you in many, many different ways. And if you're not on the lookout for them, you won't recognize what they are. So it's not a check. That's just a scorecard. It's really more the opportunities, and as I said earlier, to contribute, to give more. I mean, the thing that I like to consider is, what can I do to be of service to somebody else? True servant leadership. And that's not easy to do. When you take the eye off of you and focus on someone else in a different way, it really changes the dynamic.
Yeah.
And it's great to experience that when you're truly being selfless and giving, and at the same time being grateful for what you have and have a clear idea of what you like to have. I mean, would I like to make more money? Of course I would. But it doesn't become the end game. So I go get it at cost. It comes as a recognition that I'm offering greater value. And that's the last 15, 20 years of my life. That's exactly what's occurred. And so I'm blessed that. And I'm hopeful that other people can try and do that. You're the age of my daughter, so I can
Exactly. But no, and that's the thing is that's the thing that I love about talking to you, is that you always, is that we always offer each other whatever it is that we have with our own different perspectives. Right. And I think that it's important for people to, you can hear how many parallels there are between what happens in an individual and then what happens in a business or what happens otherwise, right? Of this understanding. And it's the same for you. So Fred, that I remember during the retreat, your wife said that using the language of the retreat, I'll try and simplify it so it's not like all the jargon that they use there, but this understanding of the unknown and is effectively the experience that you have around money. And I say the unknown as in like the possibility has a space with you with abundance and money, right? Meaning that it's not just a particle and it's like, I'm going to receive a paycheck and it's transactional. Like your experience with money is completely predetermined already. It's like, I know exactly how much money I'm going to have in a year, and I'm stuck with that, right? Like that's what's going to happen. It's like, it's for those of you who are familiar with the kind of armchair quantum physics, that some people think of money as a particle. Like, I know exactly where it is today and I know where it's going to be tomorrow. And what that does is that it may make it nice and predictable and fun for you, or not even fun for you at all, honestly. It may make it predictable and risk-free, but it turns it into a particle and it removes possibility from the equation. It removes the unknown from the equation, right? And so by turning it into a particle, you don't allow magic or whatever you want to call, you don't allow these other channels and other things to come in to help things, right? And so for you, we use the term time space, that Fred and your idea of abundance and wealth is in a time space place. It's in a place where it's like anything could happen. And I trust that principle is there. You then can apply that to health, or you then could apply that to all these other things. Like, recognize what in your life is already a predetermined factor, right? It's already that thing that you're like, oh, I know that this is going to happen. I'm supposed to go to the doctor. The doctor's going to tell me this or this, and it's going to happen this way, right? And I know how the story is going to go. And you're like, well, actually, what would you allow the unknown and possibility to come into that equation, right? And I think ultimately that's what we're talking about with balance. Because if you're walking along a tightrope and you have a rock on one end and you have a whole bunch of kind of other things on the other, right? So for instance, an example would be, okay, I have something coming into my business. I have an upcoming date that's happening. I think I know exactly what's going to happen with this decision point because, private equity is going to come in, or my investors are going to come in and they're going to ask for a specific thing. And this is exactly how it's going to go. There's no possibility that anything good can happen between now and then. I know exactly how it's going to go because I'm going to try and predict it. You've turned that future into a rock that cannot be moved, that cannot be changed. There's no room for possibility to come into that.
Yeah, it's your
right?
perspective. Yeah,
Exactly.
agreed.
Exactly. And so, just to kind of finish what I'm trying, like the idea of this, right, is that paradox usually presents itself when you feel like you know what's going to happen and you've created a rock in your life to say, well, this is definitely going to happen. And then you also have these principles that are rocks, right? Because you're like, I can't change this principle. This principle is the principle. And so you have these two things, and it feels as if there's no possibility for the unknown or any other things to come into it. You've totally decided. That's when paradox is the most difficult, because you're not allowing balance to be able to come into the equation and allow other possibilities to come in to solve the problem. Would you agree with that?
No, absolutely. I think any business I work with, the thing I try to understand is, first off, what are the most fundamental components of how this business operates that makes money, that generates, a sale, and the profit behind the sale, and how is that generated and how is that executed? And then I really question, because there's always people don't call me when things are going well; they call me when there's a challenge. And then I started looking to see who's adding value, because that's important. You gotta have people on board who add value. They don't add value, get them off. They're just costing you money. They're not an investment. I see labor as an investment, not as a cost. And the thing I always focus on is, how do I grow the business? How can I grow the business? Because if I grow the business, there's going to be more. That's abundance, right? And so whether it's a manufacturing like the bakery I ran, or the restaurant clients that I work with, or the technology clients that I work with, how do we generate more sales, which allows us to receive and to provide capital improvements, better standard of living for people, reinvestment to benefit our guests and our customers more, whatever the case may be. So it's always with the growth mindset. That's where I operate from it. Abundance is a growth mindset. How you use that abundance is a different issue, but nevertheless, it starts by that first. And that's what I do. And I've been blessed that many times it has worked very, very well. And I also try and make sure that the incentives, I'm a big believer in incentives. Give people something that they're hungry on. Human beings yearn and strive to achieve something. They really do. As people, we're not fundamentally lazy. When people get lazy, which we can say is their fault or their socioeconomic status, whatever, yeah, we're all born into circumstances that we don't control. But if you as a leader can create a context by which people can feel rewarded, and therefore intrinsic sense of self-worth and pride and love and esteem, that's going to take you really, really far. And that's the key to it, I believe, is to make sure that you get this growth mindset in your people, where they strive and understand what they're trying to do, but break it down in a way that they can truly comprehend and understand. And then little by little, a pebble a day, eventually becomes a hill, eventually becomes a mountain. And that's how you try and do it, step by step by step by step. And yet at the same time, we're in a period of great change. There's a lot of creative destruction going on out there. Old business paradigms are just being shattered.
Yeah.
They're gone. And the new ones have to emerge. And so you have to be nimble and willing to learn something new. That you have to do. You can't be rigid. I mean, balance is about, going back and forth between the opposing forces and finding the equilibrium there to say, got it. Now that I'm comfortable, it's like riding the bike for the first time. You crash into the bushes because you don't know what balance is. Eventually you have your hands open, you're just riding a bike freely because you've got the balance. Your body learns it and you can go wherever you want, with that state of balance. And the same thing happens in life. Get the point of balance regardless of condition, and you will adapt and be nimble and flow through it as these things come at you. And that's what is a beautiful part of being a human being. And running a business is a great testing ground to figure this out, for not just for yourself, but for your people as well.
Yes. And one of the ways that, from a purely personal development perspective, from my perspective, that I always think of when I talk to people about growth mindset, right? Your business, with the kind of business perspective, saying we're going to grow, right? We're going to keep expanding those channels, and we're going to give people the motivation to be able to pursue that, right? To be able to actually adopt that growth mindset themselves. When I take it to a personal development concept, and I always say that growth mindset is the motivation to understand that you can change, and the possibility, and opening up to the possibility of how interesting and different that change can be, right? I think that openness to the unknown and the possibility is a huge part of it, right? And so we can kind of, if we were to parallel these two definitions of growth mindset, right? I think that we could see that, motivation is a huge part of a growth mindset, right? That you're willing to change, you're willing to move, you're willing to grow and to go into places that are unknown, right? That
Right.
have possibility in them that you didn't consider before. You don't have all the answers right now. You recognize you don't have all the answers right now. Whether that's a company recognizes that in its state right now, it doesn't want to stay in this state. It wants to grow. It wants to change, right? And it's the same thing with a person. A person says, I recognize where I am right now, and I actually want to adopt a growth mindset because I want to see how, I'm going to be curious to see how good can it get, right? And I'm
Right.
willing for it to get bad, perceiving bad, universe is neutral, but I'm willing to see it get a little bit harder in the process of seeing how good it can get.
You're learning new skills. I mean, in business, there's an ROI. And I said it starts by giving greater value to the person who's ultimately paying you for the service. When it says self-development, you're your own customer. So what are you willing to invest in yourself that you believe will give you a greater return out of the effort put forth? And so I look at ROI, that's your return on investment. I also look at ROE, return on emotion. And nothing better than winning. Nothing feels better than overcoming the fear inside oneself and the challenge one has as an individual and as a leader. And both those things go hand in hand. They're the two pillars that you have to, what do you know? What do you understand? What are your skills? And also your willingness to believe in yourself and invest in yourself. And it pays. No, I don't think anyone can go bankrupt when they count on themselves. It's when they don't count on themselves, they go bankrupt. When they have a scarcity mentality, a less than mentality, I'm not worthy mentality, imposter syndrome. And this isn't about being cocky. This is about being confident. And we're all born and blessed with gifts and grace. We just have to find out what it is. And it's not always easy to do, but that's what the opportunity provides us. That's what life has given us, these lessons to say, okay, you got to figure it out. Here you go. Now show it. And that's what we're trying to do.
Right. And that's where the ABCs, I feel like, are a wonderful way of actually trying to convey what true confidence is. Because if your confidence is based on a principle that says, if I always appear confident, then everyone's going to think I'm confident. That's a pretty good strategy. That's not bad. A lot of people do that, right? But it's not a universal thing.
Fake it till you make it is real. Yeah, you can do that.
There's a fake it till you make it thing. We're not going to deny that fake it till you make it is actually a really good strategy, and it's actually something I use in personal development all the time when somebody is just genuinely kind of down on themselves to the point where they feel like they can't break free of a specific way of being. But what I mean by that is that there's an understanding that the confidence is that you're wanting to actually align yourself with something that says that I actually fundamentally am of value, right? That I am enough, right? Like that's what you really want. Like fake it till you make it is a good temporary solution, but it is not a universal principle, right?
No, it's not. Right. Yeah. It's just the technique and a tactic to use in the greater thing.
So alignment with the principle that says I am enough, I have value. My product is like, I fundamentally recognize that whatever I offer the world is going to be of value to someone, not just a value to, not just a value to one small group of people. And it's actually going to be exploitative or detrimental to anybody else, right? This understanding of like, I have a principle that I'm aligning with. I'm embracing the paradox, which means that I'm trying as hard as I can to allow two opposing truths, things that feel completely at odds with one another, to exist in the same space. And I'm doing that by allowing the possibility of what could happen and the unknown to kind of come into that equation. That's how I would say it, right?
No, and that's beautiful, because as you're a living case study, we're going to follow up on that on our next episode. So right now we've gone through alignment and balance. The next one, which is coherence, that's where the rubber hits the road. That's when all the talk sort of ends. And now it's like, all right, move forward with conviction, with commitment, and with courage, and see whether or not all the stuff we've been talking about works. And that's really the key to it. That's why it's the three legs of the stool. Right now we've got two legs covered. We got the third one.
We've got two legs, so it's all well and good for me to sit here and be like, I have confidence. I've aligned with the fact that abundance is something that I really, really want, and I have the balance to be able to be like, oh, I can have I'm okay with risk and I'm okay with abundance, and I'm not risking one in order to embrace the other. And I'm okay with freedom and abundance, and they aren't actually mutually exclusive. And I'm okay with embracing whatever this balance looks like in myself. And now I'm just going to sit back and not do anything and not employ that growth mindset.
Now, the next
and
one's good.
just intellectually understand this. No.
Yeah. The next one is it. That's the third leg, and it's a fun one. All of them are necessary. They're all challenging in their own way when we go through it. But once you get the process down, it's miracles happen.
Agreed. Miracles happen. So thank you, Fred, for your kind wisdom today, and for all of your wisdom of however this looks, and we'll see how it goes. And I hope that everyone can kind of see and draw the parallels between, even though we took a personal development thing with me in this case study of how it actually applies directly to business, and how we can apply this to our own difficulties in leadership, in which we recognize that it feels as if we have two opposing things going on. How do we actually reconcile them, and what balance looks like? It's very dynamic.
Yeah. Well, great. Well, it's wonderful to spend time again, and look forward to our next session together.
Indeed. Thank you, Fred. Thank you.
The Executive and the Mystic podcast, co-hosted by Fred LeFranc and Kristina Wiltsee, where wisdom meets business.